I believe that everyone has at least one great story that only they can tell. My best story is dedicated to discovering these tales and releasing them into the wild, one guest at a time. I'm Travis Tidmore. Join me as I discover Aadip Desai's best story. Aadip, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hey man, I'm hanging in there. I'm in LA, so it's a little bit crazy.
I imagine it is right now, especially. Well, you guys are under curfew, is that right?
Yeah, we're under curfew and we get these fun updates on our phones every day, like it's at 5 now, it's at 10, it's at 9. We're like just stick to it, A couple hours
Wow,
here and there is not gonna matter. So yeah, it's kind of wild.
that's
Um,
crazy.
and I have kids, so I have kids and asthma, so I'm not gonna really be out protesting because the risk is way too high for me
Yeah.
personally. But all my friends are getting tear gas, so that's good.
Where I live, we're having a rally tomorrow, but there haven't been like daily protests. But
Uh-huh.
last weekend we didn't go because my wife has asthma and we have 2 kids, but also being in the middle of Texas, there were a whole lot of just, oh, we're going to be out there with our guns and we're going to show them. And I was like, I don't feel like I can take my kids to something like that and
right, exactly,
put them in that danger. So
yeah, exactly.
I understand. Well, Aadip, tell me your backstory.
Yeah, my parents came from India to the US, and they joined the Air Force. So we moved kind of all over the country, including Wichita Falls, Texas, and
Awesome.
so we were on the base there. And we lived in New York, and my dad was team doctor for the Yankees for a while, which was cool. And and so we were military, so they keep moving us around. We end up in Sacramento. It was basically like Texas, it's like Hicks and pollen. And so I was this little kid, and I was like, I want to just get back to New York. And so I was a little kid trumpet player, and I was all about jazz, and I played French horn. And so I was like, I'm gonna be a musician, but I can't tell my parents because they, of course, Indian doctors want an Indian doctor kid. So I was like, okay, I'll tell them I'm going to go, be pre-med. But then, I did that, but I was just playing gigs every single night and sleeping in class, just not being a good student. And I was a chem major, and then I switched to econ, but I was a music minor, but every day was just music, music, music. So I did that. And then I graduated, and I was like, okay, I'm going to work in music. So I worked in music in Seattle for a long time. Before that, I was an intern for Randy Jackson down here in LA, and I worked for an NPR station and did stuff like that. And then in college, I picked up the drums. So in college, I played trumpet and drums. I was a jazz trumpet player and a punk drummer or whatever. And so I worked in the music business, and then I was music supervising a film, and I was like, oh, this is cool. But music supervision is very much like being a lawyer. You're just negotiating contracts with managers and stuff. It's not that interesting at that level, at the low level. Yeah. And so, and I was secretly writing screenplays on the side, but I wasn't telling anybody. And the director goes, hey, do you want to come into this punch up room? We're going to punch up the script. And I was like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, you're funny. Come do it. And then I got some jokes in the script, and I was like, okay, this is the real stuff. This is the juice. So I want to do that. Awesome. So I pivoted to writing. And I ran a screenwriting nonprofit in Seattle for a long time. And then I was like, okay, we got to move to LA because I can't do another cloudy day in Seattle. Just couldn't do a single, my wife's like, let's go. She was bags packed. So we come to LA, no real plan. I just wanted to write for television for so long. And so we got here, and I did the usual things that everyone else does. You're an assistant to these people, and you do this and that. And eventually I ended up working for Reading Rainbow, and I was an animator for them. And then I became a project manager and a web producer. And then when I left, I was the manager of education, which was really interesting because I would meet a lot of people from Texas actually. And they would be Republicans. They're I'm a Republican, but I hate Donald Trump so much. And DeVos, these are educators who are, they're like, I'm a registered Republican. I ran for a Republican ticket, but I hate Donald Trump. So that gave me some hope for the future.
Yeah.
And so I got to work with that population, which is great. Like my job was just like giving free stuff to like poor schools. You know, it's a
That's
cool job.
awesome.
So I get laid off, and I always wanted to write, like, but I'd always been doing it on the side. You know, I never really went all in on it. And so, you know, I get laid off. I come home, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And we go to my wife and I go to a party that night for her boss. And this is not the story we're gonna talk about, but this is a little tiny story. And I get pretty shit faced because I just got fired, and it was like, you know, like, or laid off. It's laid off. It wasn't fired.
Yeah.
And so we're like driving home, and she's driving, and I'm like, oh wait, she didn't really have that much to drink. That's weird. And I was kind of blasted. I was like, well, at least, you know, yeah, I lost my job, but at least you're not pregnant or anything. She's like, well, you know, it's like baby number two, no job. We just got like a dishwasher put in, and I hate spending money. So I was like, can we take it out? You know, I was just, you know how it is. Like, it's like you have one kid, and that's like crazy scary. And then like number two, and you're like, I don't have a way to like support this. And her response was so weird. She was like, or not weird. It's not weird for her, but weird for just about any other person I know. She said, you know, you shouldn't get a job. You shouldn't get a survival job. You should just focus on writing. And I was like, are you sure? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, well, how are we going to do it? She's like, we'll figure it out. And so she's very supportive, like crazy supportive.
That's awesome.
So I said, okay, I'll go all in. And I was kind of a mess, and I was a humongous mess. And I was like, I need to get, you know how like when you get stuck like emotionally or like creatively, you're like, I don't know how to get out of this. Yeah. So I did this book called The Artist's Way, and I talk about like all the interviews or like panels I'm on. I like tell people about it because it's like a magical book, and I ignore all the religious stuff in it, but it kind of got me out of my head and got me in, like reconnecting with who I was as a kid and like what I was into, and then it just got me back writing. And then like a friend of mine said, hey, you should apply to AFI for film school, because he knew I wanted to go to film school. Like my whole like since I was like really young, I wanted to go. Everyone talked me out of it because they're all very, you know, practical. You know, everyone I know is practical. And so I was like, okay, I'll apply next year. And he's like, no, apply now. I'm like, it's due in 2 weeks. He's like, you can do it. And so I applied for AFI, and I'm like, I'm not getting in. And all I cared about was like hitting the deadline. And I hit the deadline, and then like I got in. I was like, okay, I have 2 kids, and I'm going to go to graduate school in film. I'm going to be in class with kids who are like 18, and I was. And so I'm in AFI, and then I'm sitting in class, and I get an email from like the Disney writing program. They're like, congratulations, you're a semifinalist. And I was like, I don't even remember applying. And it's because I did it automatically like every year. It wasn't even something I thought about. And so I had already given up on getting into like an elite TV writing fellowship. So I was like, oh, is this real? Like it looked like spam. I was like, what is this? So I go through the process, and it's very tough, like the process of doing the Disney semifinals and finals. And like 2,000 people apply, and they take like 8 to 13 people. And this was my 5th time applying. So I get in, and they call me around Christmas, and then I drop out of grad school, but I stay an extra 2 months to finish my short film and shoot it, which I was really happy I did that. And then, I started the Disney program. And then in the Disney program, they help you get staffed on a show. So I staffed on the Goldbergs. So I was a writer on the Goldbergs for a year. And that just finished, and now I'm like looking for the next gig. But yeah, that's how I got to this like crazy place. But I've had, as you can tell, I've had this like crazy circuitous route to where I am now. But I think it's like the real lesson of that story is like, just do the thing that you love, that you think you're good at, like now. Like don't wait. Like I kind of waited to go all in because that fear. But I think everybody should, you know, and like you're never too old, and you know, I just don't believe in any of that stuff. So that's how we got here.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's like a tiny mini story of how we got here.
Now that you've told us that little story, what's your best story?
Okay, my best story, I call it my best story. I think I have other stories that rival it now, but this is my favorite story. How do I begin? Okay, so we lived in this apartment in West Hollywood for like 6 years. And for those who don't know, like West Hollywood is like this awesome neighborhood, like very gay, pretty diverse, and but it's like super nice, and like you run into celebrities, and so it's kind of fun. And it actually, like, they basically burned it to the ground last week in the riots. So that was my neighbor, like Melrose and Fair, like that was my neighborhood. I was like, no, like I used to like stroller my kid into like all these shops when she was little. Like she's watching these places she grew up in, like burned to the ground. So that was a little weird, but so like this was in 2013, like September, and we're living in this like tiny apartment. I think our apartment was 800 square feet max, you know, and it's like two of us, a baby, and two dogs. So we're like on top of each other. We both work from home. And so I have this bike, and it's like a cruiser bike that I got when we lived kind of on the west side and in Culver City, close to the ocean, where it's flat. So I could ride this cruiser bike, and it was cool because it like, you know, it was like wide handle, and it was like matte black with like orange skulls on it. So it's pretty rad.
Nice.
It has been stolen 5 times. And it was 4 times before this story it had been taken. And like my neighbors like, drop the bike. Like everyone has known about this bike getting stolen. And like people like fucking sawing through, you know, these chains and stuff. So I have this cool bike. The last time it got stolen, when the cops came to take the report, they're like, this is a pretty cool bike. I can see why they took it. And I was like, it's a $200 bike. Like, it's so dumb. Like, there's a $3,000 bike downstairs right now, but they didn't touch that. And so, you know, I knew that this bike was hot stuff. And I had like aftermarket parts on it because I like to tweak anything I have with like weird shit. Yeah. So I had like stars, you know, on it, and I had like an aftermarket seat that was more comfortable, and like a dorky like ring on, you know, a bell on it, like that kind of shit. So like this bike is tight, and like I hardly rode it, but I was just mad that people kept stealing it. And so it's September 2013, and I go downstairs to go check something in the car, and like my bike's gone, and I was like, oh, because it was chained up, and I was like, not again, because it's easy to get into our apartment building. Like you can just sneak in when the gate opens for cars, and you just run right in. So I'm like, oh, not again. I'm so tired of this. And I'm like, do I just let it go? You know, it's like 5th time's the charm.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm fucking angry about this. Even though I never ride this bike, right? Because like where we were living there, like it's too dangerous to ride a bike, in my opinion. But it's just the principle of it. And I was like, so I go on Facebook like normal people do, and go like, my bike gets stolen, you know, that kind of thing. And my buddy Elizabeth, she goes, did you check Craigslist? And I was like, no, I didn't even think to check Craigslist. So I'm like, okay, I pop on there. I find it in 3 seconds. Because this bike is like a weird brand that not a lot of people buy. It looks very particular, very specific. And so I was like, that's my bike. It had all the aftermarket shit. It was my bike. And I was like, oh my God, I found my bike. And I'm like, how do I get my bike back? And I'm like, oh, I'll talk to the cops. So I'll find out maybe where my bike is. So I see the phone number on the Craigslist ad, and I'm like, okay, yeah, there's a phone number there. I wonder if they took anything else. So I take the phone number and I put it back into like in search in Craigslist, and pages and pages and pages of shit pops up. So it's like cell phones and keyboards and like all kinds of shit. And I was like, oh my God, I found a crime ring, right? Because the same phone number for all these things. And I was like, fuck. So I print out all the pages of it. And I had called the cops, and I was waiting for like a detective to call me. And they had told me that like 15 bikes had gotten stolen on our street that night. So it was an operation, like a van rolled up, and so I call my guy back, and I'm like, I think I have some really interesting stuff. And he's like, well, we can't get your bike back unless you have the serial number. And at the time in 2013, like bike shops didn't really record serial numbers. They started in like 2014 or 15. So I was like, I don't have that. I have my receipt. I don't have the bike, so I can't give you the serial number. So everyone, like, record your serial numbers from your bikes right now. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna drive down to the Hollywood, like the West Side or Hollywood police station, and just like show them what I found. So I roll down there, and I have my stack of Craigslist. I have them somewhere. I don't have them with me, but I roll in, and I'm like, I think I found a crime ring, and my bike is in it. And they're like, really? How did you do that? And I was like, Google. And they're like, whoa. And I'm like, oh, no wonder you can't catch murderers. Like, you can't even, like, I just like couldn't believe it. I mean, it's like, and I don't like, this is kind of weird, but like, I don't really like cops, and they don't like me. So I was like, I just need your help, and you're just fulfilling, you know, my stereotype of you, where it's like, cops are worthless. And so, but like the lady who was working dispatch, she was like very nice. She's like, okay, I'll call the detective down and see he'll come down and look at this. And then she calls him. He's like, oh, he's not going to come down. It's just not enough, you know, for us to really run down. I'm like, they stole 15 bikes and then all this other stuff. You don't have any interest in it? They're like, no, really can't do anything about it. And I know, like, in the grand scheme, like, of what's happening now, like, it's nothing. It's like a nothing thing. But like, it wasn't just me. It was like, I felt bad for like all the other people who had their stuff stolen, especially like cell phones and like, you know, keyboards. Like my bike I don't use, and I was just the principal. So I was like, you know what, fuck this, I'm going to take my bike back. So my buddy calls me and he's like, what are you gonna do about this bike? And I was like, I'm gonna take it back. He's like, that's why I called you. Like, he's like, we're gonna take this back. I was like, yes. And he has a very interesting backstory that I can't talk about, but let's just say he's trained for this. And so we're like, okay, we're gonna call the number, and then we're gonna organize like a meet, you know, a little meet on the street. And so we get the burner app and we put it on my phone. So it like totally munges and like gives a fake phone number every time, so no one knows who you are, and it encrypts. Criminals use it, and so we use it. We call the number, like, and you know, we're very low key, and like every time we call, we use a different person to call, like with a different voice. One of my friends, like, he was a neighbor across the street. He was like, we're gonna get your bike. And then when push came to shove, we're like, we're gonna get this bike back. He like chickened out. He like totally flaked out. I was like, man, you were like, he was like more gung ho than any of us, and he just bails. And I was like, oh, you're no good. And so we call the guy, and he's like, yeah, I got this, you know, bike. He didn't even know what he had, really. Like, someone else clearly typed the ad up, you know, in Craigslist. And I'm like, yeah, I'm really interested in that bike, and my name is Mike, and like, you know, I didn't give, you know, don't give the real name. And we schedule a meetup, and we're like, okay, so the plan is we're gonna meet up with this guy. We're gonna see if we can like roll him, or like just take the bike, or like convince them to give it to us so we don't go to the cops. And we didn't really have I didn't have like a huge great plan thought out. And my wife is so mad that we're doing this, because we have like a 1-year-old, and I'm gonna risk my life to get a bike back that I don't ride. But for the principle of it, you have to do it. So we meet up with the guy, and so we meet up in Hollywood, and I have like a Subaru, and so it has a big back, and I was like, I parked that kind of like on Highland Avenue. And so like we're right by like, you know, Man's Chinese, we're all like right there.
Nice.
And I was like, okay, I'll meet you. And so, and my buddy, he's like in his, like, he had a shitty beater car. And so he like parks in the parking lot nearby, but not so much that he could spook anybody. And this guy rolls up, and he's got my bike, and he's like this dirt bag, like what you would expect, like just whatever you're picturing in your mind, that's what he was. And he's just like this dumb, dirty, like person. And I go, hey, I'm and I start to say my real name, and then I say, so then it sounds like I said my name is Mike, you know? And like, oh, he won't even notice the first part, because that's not a real name. So I'm like, Mike. And he's like, are you Mike? I'm like, yeah, I'm a Mike. And I was like, oh, can I take it for a spin? And he's like, yeah, sure. And I was like, okay, cool. And so I like get the bike, and then I just ride. I'm very subtle I'm like riding it as if I'm really gonna like buy the bike.
Yeah.
And then once I'm out of like, you know, his, oh, and the other thing is like, when I saw the bike, I was like, oh, is this all original stuff from the bike? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, I know that's, you know, those are all aftermarket. I put those on there. And so I roll out of there, and then like I roll all the way up to my car, and I open the trunk, I throw the bike in, and I take off for home. And then like the guy's like texting me on the burner app, like, hey, where are you? Because it's been a while. And during that time, my buddy like rolls up and says, hey man, do you know where I can go to like a Jack in the Box? Like, where's the closest Jack in the Box? So he's like, he bought me like 15 more minutes with this dumb, you know, like, hey, there's a Jack in the Box like around the corner. It's the dumbest question, but he got him. And so he kept him on ice for a little bit. I get home, like I'm not that far from home. We're in West Hollywood. The drop was like in Hollywood. So I text my buddy, I'm like, I'm home. And he's like, okay, cool. And he tells the guy, okay, I'm out. And then, and he drives back to his place. The guy's like, where's my bike? Like, it's like 45 minutes to an hour at this point. And he's so mad. He's like, I'm going to fucking kill you guys. And my wife's like, oh my God, they know where we live, dumb. And I was like, oh, shit. And so I was like, okay, what do we do? And my buddy's like very cool. And he calls the guy, like doesn't text him, he calls him, and he's like, I'm a Hollywood sheriff. If you fucking come west of Fairfax, we're gonna fucking drop you and all your shitty friends. Like, you don't come west of Fairfax. And so for years, no bikes were like stolen on our street. And I think it's these guys who are always doing it. And so like I return home victorious with my bike, and then my buddy shows up, and I was just like, it's funny, but it's like, why would you risk so much for this thing? And like right now it's sitting outside, rusting away outside my office right now, because I live on a hill and I can't like ride it. I can't stop if I go.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's my crazy story. I'm trying to think if I forgot any like insane details. Yeah, like some people are like, oh, you're gonna get in trouble for stealing your own bike. And I was like, well, that's gonna be hard to prove because they don't have the serial number either. And yeah, I think, let me see. I'm like, I wasn't using notes. I'm just like looking at what I had written down to see what's, yeah, that's pretty much, yeah, that's it. That's the whole deal. So I told that story. I tell it at parties sometimes when people know about it, like, hey, tell them about when you know, because like it's fun to be like a little bit of a spy and a little bit of like an undercover. I get the undercover cop thing now, like the juice of that. But like, and so when I was doing it, it all comes back around. So like when I was in the process of getting into the Disney writing program, it was like a huge interview process. And at one point, like they just ask you random ass questions, and it's like a panel interview, and they're like, oh, is there anything else you want to tell us that like might tell us a lot about who you are? And I was like, well, I have this story, and I told this story, and they're like, that's the craziest, dumbest story. Like it's a perfect comedian's like caper, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that helped me get in, honestly. Like I think it like pushed me over the edge, because like we just got to see what else is in this guy's brain, because he did that in real life. So what's he gonna make up, you know?
That's awesome. So
yeah, that's my story.
Well, that was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen the other ones, like what other people are talking about, but it's kind of a perfect representation of my point of view. You know?
That's awesome. Well, where can people find you and your work these days?
I am on Twitter at Aadip, which is AADIP. I'm probably the only person who has his first name as his Twitter handle. And I run this group called the LATV Writers. Facebook group has 15,000 people on it, so I'm in there all the time. And then like, you know, my episode of the Goldbergs aired around Christmas time. Like they gave me the Christmas Hanukkah episode, which is great because I love Christmas and Hanukkah. So like they thought they were giving me like a shitty episode, and I was like, yeah, I was like stoked. And I'm like, no, why is he so happy? So yeah, you can watch that. It's called It's a Wonderful Life, and it was originally supposed to be like a Scrooged episode, but we couldn't get the rights and stuff. So we ended up like changing to It's American Life. This is a Wonderful Life. And so it's kind of delightful. And yeah, that's like kind of it. Like that's my first credit. Yeah, so I'm just like active on social media and stuff, but yeah, you can find me there.
Awesome.
And yeah, I think that's all my shit.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. It was great having you.
Yeah, man. I have other stories, so if you run out of content, let me know. All right.
Perfect. I'd love to have you
one
back.
even crazier than that story. That's recent.
Yes,
so
we will definitely have to have you back for that then, if it's a crazier story than that one.
It is crazier.
Excellent. Well, we will definitely have you back. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
Special thanks to Aadip for that fantastic story. As always, new episodes drop right here every Tuesday and Thursday. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Our title music is Red, White, Black, and Blue by Peg and the Rejected. If you have a story you'd like to tell, hit us up on our Facebook page, on Twitter at My Best Story Show, or via email at mybeststorypodcast@gmail.com. Those links are in the description. Until next time, go live your best story.